The wine hit my face before I even understood what was happening. Red, cold, sharp. It ran down my cheek like blood. My son, Andy, froze. He just stood there, eyes wide, fingers trembling around his fork. The woman who threw at my daughter-in-law, Carly, didn't move either. Her arms still hung in the air, her chest heaving, her eyes wild. For a moment, no one spoke. Only the sound of the glass rolling across the floor and shattering against the table leg. I wiped the liquid from my face and said quietly, "You need to leave." Carly laughed, a brittle, nervous sound that didn't belong in any home. "Leave? You call the police on your own family?" Andy's voice cracked. "Mom, please," but before he could finish, the officer at the door stepped in. "Ma'am, you'll have to come with us." Carly turned toward me, her face twisted in disbelief. "You're going to regret this," she hissed. The officer warned her not to make threats. That only made her angrier. As she was let out, Andy turned to me, tears spilling faster than words. "How could you do this?" he shouted. "She's my wife." I stood still, my cheek still burned, but my voice didn't shake. "And I'm your mother," I said softly. "And this is my house." When the door closed, the silence that followed was heavier than any scream. Andy's face changed, anger, confusion, betrayal all at once. He turned away and ran upstairs. I heard the slam of his bedroom door. I sank into the armchair, my hands trembling just enough to spill the last of my tea. The bruise on my temple throbbed, but it wasn't the pain that hurt. It was the look in his eyes, like he didn't recognize me anymore. Still, I had no regrets. Years on the bench taught me that justice never feels kind in the moment it's done. And yet, that night, as the house fell back into silence, I couldn't stop wondering, had I just saved my son or lost him forever? The house felt too quiet after they left. Not peaceful quiet, the other kind. The kind that hums with regret and echoes your own heartbeat back at you. I sat there for a long time, staring at the red stain on the tablecloth. It had spread into the shape of a crooked heart. Strange, I thought, how love always leaves a mark before it fades. Upstairs, Annie's footsteps came and went, angry, restless, pacing. He didn't speak to me again that night. When he finally came down, his eyes were swollen and his bag was packed. "I'm going to get Carly," he said flatly. "We'll stay at Patty's until we figure things out, Andy." "Listen, no, Mom. You've already made your choice." He grabbed his keys and walked out before I could answer. The front door closed, and the silence came rushing back. Heavier than before, I sat there in the dark, hands folded in my lap, feeling the wine dry on my skin. For the first time in years, I didn't know if I'd done the right thing. Had I protected him or pushed him further into the fire? I tried to read. I tried to sleep. But the night refused to end. It stretched, slow and merciless, until the phone finally rang. It was Andy. His voice was colder now, careful, distant. "We're at Patty's. Carly's out on bail. The hearing's next week. Andy, I'm standing by my wife." The line went dead before I could breathe out my reply. I sat at my desk, the same one I'd used during my years on the bench. The surface was worn smooth from decades of decisions, some merciful, some necessary. My gavel might have been gone, but the habit of seeking truth never left me. I opened a blank folder on my computer and named it Case Carly. Inside it, I began saving every document: the police report, hospital notes, photos of the bruise I hadn't wanted to admit existed. Every detail, every word, every pattern. For 30 years, I built cases for other people's justice. Now, for the first time, I was building one for my son and for myself. The next morning, I opened my laptop and stared at the folder labeled Case Carly. It looked small, ordinary, but I knew the weight it carried, the difference between justice and regret. I had spent years teaching other people how to tell truth from panic, evidence from emotion. But that night had blurred both. I wasn't sure anymore if I was seeking justice or absolution. Still, I clicked open the file. Police report, hospital record, witness statement, mine. I read each line carefully, but something felt off. Too clean, too quick. Then I saw it, the officer's name. Rick Henderson, It took me a moment to place it. Rick, my old partner from the courthouse days, the detective who once called me the only judge who didn't flinch from the truth. I dialed the number listed at the bottom of the report. 3 rings. A rough, familiar voice answered. Detective Henderson. Rick, I said softly. There was a pause, then a low whistle. Well, I'll be damned. Judge Ellena Moore. Didn't expect to hear that name again. Neither did I said. We met the next day at a small diner on the edge of town, the same place we used to meet between hearings. The booths hadn't changed. Neither had Rick's habit of ordering 2 coffees before I even sat down. He looked at me over the rim of his cup. So, what's the story? I told him everything: the dinner, the glass, the bruise, the bail. When I finished, he didn't speak right away. He just tapped his spoon against the saucer. Something about this doesn't add up, he said finally. You said Carly had no priors? None, I replied. But she was calm, too calm, when they arrested her. He leaned back, his eyes narrowing the way they used to when a puzzle started taking shape. Give me a day, he said. Maybe 2. Rick, I'm not promising answers, Judge. Just the truth. You always said that was enough. When he left, I stayed in the booth a while longer, watching the rain beat on the window. It hit the glass softly like someone knocking from the other side. For the first time since that night, I felt something close to purpose again. Not peace, not yet, but direction. When I returned home, I placed a folder on the table, next to my cold tea. The clock ticked, steady and sure. And in that rhythm, I realized something. Maybe this wasn't just about Carly anymore. Maybe it was about the part of me I'd buried long before she threw that glass. The part that never stopped fighting for truth, no matter how much it hurt. Rick called 2 days later. Judge, you got time to talk? His voice had that gravelly edge it always carried when the truth was about to hurt, always. I said, we met at the same diner. He came in with a manila folder under his arm, and that look, the one I remembered from courtrooms. Right before he changed the course of someone's life, he set the folder on the table. Carly, he said, she's not clean. My heart skipped. What do you mean? He opened the folder slowly, sliding a photo across the table. It was a mugshot, younger, harder eyes. Same woman. Shoplifting charge. 2 counts of fraud. Both sealed when she turned 21. Then he flipped to another page. A restraining order. Different name. Same face. The guy dropped the complaint after a week. I stared at the papers, the words blurring. She told us she never had trouble with the law. I whispered. Rick nodded. That's what she wanted you to believe. But it's not the charges that bother me, it's the pattern. She gets close, wins sympathy, gains trust, then chaos follows. I leaned back, trying to steady my breath. She's done this before. Rick's eyes softened. You know how predators work, Judge. They don't always come for wallets. Sometimes they come for hearts. Outside, rain streaked down the window again, the same rain that had started the night everything shattered. I thought about Andy, about the way he defended her without question. He wasn't blind. He was bound. She's clever, Rick continued. Knows how to twist things, make people doubt their own memory. You taught me that in court, remember? I smiled faintly, though it hurt. I wish I'd listened to myself. Rick slid the folder toward me. You sure you want to keep digging? This'll get darker before it gets better. I ran my fingers along the photo, her defiant stare frozen in time. Yes, I said quietly. If she's lying to him, I need to know. For his sake, Rick nodded. Then we start here. As he left, I stayed in that booth long after the coffee had gone cold. Every word he'd said echoed louder the longer I sat. Sometimes they come for hearts. That night, I sat at my desk again, the folder open beside me. I studied her handwriting on the marriage license, the gentle loops in her signature. And then I noticed something: the same last name listed as witness on another document from years before. Same handwriting, same woman, different man. A chill ran through me. For the first time since the wine hit my face, I realized this wasn't about anger. It was about warning someone who refused to believe he was in danger, and the hardest truth of all, the person who needed saving was still calling her family. The next morning I called Andy. He didn't answer. I tried again that evening. Still nothing. By the third day, I drove across town myself, Their house sat behind white fences and trimmed hedges, neat, perfect, the kind of home that pretends everything inside is fine. But I knew better. Sometimes the prettiest places hide the ugliest truths. Carly opened the door before I could knock. Her smile was the kind that never reached her eyes. "Well," she said softly, "if it isn't the judge herself, is Andy home?" I asked. She leaned on the doorframe. "Busy. Work call." Her tone made it sound like I was the intruder. I didn't step inside. "Tell him I need 5 minutes." Her eyes narrowed. "You really don't know when to stop, do you?" "I know exactly when to stop," I said, my voice low and calm. "And it's when my son stops being safe." She crossed her arms, the charm fading from her face. "You think I'm dangerous? You think he believes that?" I held her gaze. "Not yet." Something flickered behind her eyes, anger, maybe fear, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. She smirked. "You taught him to trust facts, didn't you?" "Funny thing about facts, they can be rewritten." The door closed in my face. I stood there on the porch, my pulse pounding. Through the glass panel, I could see Andy coming down the stairs, confusion written all over his face. He looked at her first, then at me. His mouth opened, but she grabbed his arm, whispered something, and his expression changed. He shook his head. "Mom, please, just go." That broke something inside me I didn't know could still break. I turned without a word and walked back to my car. When I sat behind the wheel, I didn't start the engine right away. My hands were shaking, not from anger, but from helplessness. I'd seen this before, not in my family, but in courtrooms. Victims defending their abusers. Parents believing the charm instead of the bruises. I used to think experience made me immune to manipulation, but it doesn't. Not when love is involved. That night, I called Rick again. "She's turning him against me," I said. He sighed, the kind of sigh that sounds like a long road ahead. "She's building a story, Judge. Probably already told him you're unstable, emotional, maybe jealous of her." I closed my eyes. "She's good," I whispered. "Yeah?" he said. "Too good. But everyone leaves a trail." "What kind of trail?" "The kind they don't know they're making." When I hung up, I looked at the family photo on my desk. Andy at 8 years old, missing a front tooth, his arm around me. He'd trusted me once with everything. Now, all I had left was a folder, a bruise that had faded, and a truth no one wanted to hear. Still, I wasn't done. I'd spent my life watching people mistake silence for surrender. They always forgot the quietest ones are the ones still thinking, still building their next move. Sleep became a stranger after that. I'd close my eyes and see Andy's face at the door, torn between me and the woman who was slowly erasing me. So I did what I've always done when the world stopped making sense. I went looking for answers. It started small. Old courthouse databases, archived files, forgotten records. I still had friends in the system. People who remembered what it meant to look the other way only when justice was blind, not when people were. Most of the records on Carly Bennett were sealed tight. But sealed doesn't mean gone. If you know where to look, even silence leaves fingerprints. After 2 days, I found something. A case file from 2012, small town jurisdiction, 2 states over. A fraud investigation that ended quietly, never went to trial. The woman's name was different. Carla Benner. Same birthday. Same eyes staring back at me from the mugshot. I printed the photo and laid it beside her current one. Different hair. Different smile. Same darkness behind both. Rick called that evening. "You've been busy," he said. "Habit," I replied. He chuckled. "Found something?" I slid the photo across the table when we met. He stared at it for a long time. "She changed her name," he muttered. "Classic move before relocation. She's been covering her tracks for years." He flipped through the rest of my notes, stopping at one highlighted line. "Missing person. Michael Avery?" I nodded. He was the complainant on the restraining order she had. Disappeared 6 months later. No foul play proven. But his bank accounts were emptied 2 weeks before he vanished. Rick leaned back, jaw tight. "Judge, you realize what this could mean?" "I realize she's dangerous," I said. He tapped the table. "If this gets out, your son will have to face it. And it's going to destroy him. I'd rather it destroy his illusion than his life," I said quietly. He nodded slowly. "Then we do it right." I'll pull what I can from my contacts, but you need to prepare yourself. The truth never comes without a price. When I drove home that night, the rain was falling again, soft but relentless. I parked outside my house and sat there for a while, engine running, lights off. In the reflection of the windshield, I barely recognized the woman staring back. Older, maybe. Tired, yes. But there was something else too, a fire that hadn't gone out. I thought of the years I'd spent judging other people's choices. Now life had placed me on the other side of the bench. As I walked to my front door, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Stop digging, Judge. Some truths don't need to be found. No name, no signature. But I knew exactly who it was. I looked up at the dark sky, the wind carrying a whisper through the trees, and for the first time, I said her name aloud. Carly Bennett. The sound of it felt like a verdict. By the end of the week, I could feel the distance in every call. Andy's voice had changed, quieter, heavier, rehearsed. Mom, he said, Carly told me you've been digging into her past, hiring people, making accusations. His words sounded borrowed, not spoken. Andy, listen to me, I said. She's not who you think she is. He laughed, a small, wounded sound that broke my heart. That's what she said you'd say. I closed my eyes. The trap had already closed. She showed me your emails, he continued. Said you're trying to ruin our marriage because you can't stand that she's the only woman in my life now. The silence after that sentence was a lifetime. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady but small. I raised you to see truth, not fear it. He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice cracked. Please, Mom, just stop. Whatever you think you're doing, it's only making things worse. The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, the phone still in my hand, my reflection trembling in the darkened window. Outside, the streetlight flickered, throwing shadows that looked like bars across the glass. She was clever. She'd isolated me completely, turned my love into a weapon she could use against me. I called Rick. She's ahead of us, I said. She's rewriting the story. He cursed under his breath. That's what she does. But stories like hers always crack somewhere. We just have to find the seam. A day later, a letter arrived. Hand-delivered. No return address. Inside was a photo, me and Andy at his college graduation. My arm around him, both of us laughing. Across the bottom, written in Carly's looping handwriting, were 3 words. He's mine now. My hands shook, but I didn't tear it. I pinned it to the corkboard above my desk, not out of fear, but as a reminder. Every threat is also a confession. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the house, each room echoing with pieces of a life that suddenly felt like someone else's memory. When I reached my late husband's study, I stopped. He'd always said truth is like a river, you can dam it, but it'll find a way around eventually. I lit the desk lamp and opened my notes again. If she wanted a war of words, she'd picked the wrong woman. I didn't need to shout. I'd spent my life letting silence do the work for me. The next morning, I emailed Rick. Subject: she's rewriting history. Message: then let's remind her who used to write the verdicts. Rick called at dawn. His voice was low, urgent. Judge, you need to come down to the station. When I arrived, he was standing by the evidence board, papers, photos, strings connecting one name to another. But there in the center was a face I already knew too well. Carly's, except she wasn't just Carly anymore. She was Carla Benner. Carla Avery. Carla Bennett. 3 names. 3 lives. 1 pattern. Rick handed me a folder. You were right about Michael Avery, the missing man. I opened it slowly. Inside were bank transfers, forged signatures, and 1 photo that stopped my breath. Carly, arm in arm with a man who wasn't my son, standing beside a car registered under Michael Avery's name. The date stamp? 2 weeks before his disappearance. Rick pointed to the corner of the page. Security footage from a motel outside Denver. That's the last place he was seen. I stared at the image. She looked so casual, smiling, untouched by the ruin she left behind. Rick sighed. She's clever, Judge. Changes names every few years. Finds someone stable, drains them emotionally and financially, then disappears before anyone connects the dots. My stomach turned. And Andy? Rick hesitated. She's already moved funds from his account. Small transfers. Quiet ones. Looks like she's setting up her exit. The words fell like stones in my chest. I thought of Andy's face, soft, trusting, still believing love could fix what truth refused to hide. Rick leaned forward. We can build a case. Fraud, identity theft, possible link to Avery's disappearance. But we need your testimony. What happened the night she threw the glass. The threats, the messages. I nodded. You'll have it all. Good, he said. Because she's running out of names to hide behind. When I got home, the sun was just beginning to rise. Light spilled through the blinds, thin and uncertain, as if even dawn didn't know what to make of the truth anymore. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and began to write my statement. Every word felt like reopening an old wound, but it was a wound that needed air. Sometimes healing begins with hurt. Halfway through typing, a knock echoed on the front door. 3 sharp raps. I froze. When I opened it, no one was there. Only an envelope on the porch, weighed down by a small stone. Inside, a single piece of paper. You think you can expose me? Judge's Fall 2.0 signature. No address. But I didn't need one. I folded the note and placed it beside the photo of Andy as a boy smiling. Free, unaware of the storm that would one day reach him, and I whispered to the empty room. You picked the wrong mother. I didn't sleep that night. The letter sat on the kitchen table beside my cooling tea, the words burning brighter than the candlelight. Judge's Fall 2.it wasn't a threat. It was a confession of fear. Because people like Carly only strike when they know they're cornered. By morning, I knew what I had to do. Rick called, his voice steady. We have enough to question her, but you'll have to come in. She'll expect it. I'm not hiding, I said. The precinct felt colder than I remembered. As I walked through the doors, the air changed, the buzz of voices, the hum of printers, the low rhythm of justice grinding forward. And there she was. Carly sat at the interview table, wrists resting casually on the steel surface. Her expression unreadable. She looked smaller than I remembered, though her eyes still tried to fill the room. Well, she said softly, if it isn't the Honorable Judge Moore. Her voice dripped with sarcasm. Or should I say mother-in-law? I sat across from her, calm. I don't need a title, I said. The truth will do. She laughed, a sharp sound that didn't belong in such a small room. You think you've found something? Old pictures, some papers? You have no idea how easy it is to change a name, a life, a story, maybe, I said. But you can't change a pattern. Her eyes flickered just for a second. And that was all it took. Rick slid the folder across the table. Carly Bennett, Carla Avery, Carla Benner, he said flatly. Pick whichever one you prefer. They all point to the same thing. Carly didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on me. Do you really think Andy will believe any of this? She asked. He already does, I said. He just doesn't know it yet. For the first time, her mask cracked. A small tremor in her jaw, a twitch near her eye. Fear. Trying to remember how to breathe. You're destroying your own son, she hissed. No, I said softly. I'm saving him. From you. She leaned forward, voice low and venomous. You think this makes you noble? You think you're still the judge? Look at you, alone, old, forgotten. You can't save anyone anymore. I smiled faintly. Maybe not, but the truth can. Rick stood. That's enough. He handed the file to the officer by the door. Take her in. Carly's chair screeched as she stood, her voice rising, desperate now. You'll regret this. He'll hate you for it. I looked her in the eye, calm as prayer. I'd rather be hated for telling the truth than loved for believing a lie. The door closed behind her. Silence filled the room, heavy, sacred, final. Rick turned to me. You okay? I nodded. For the first time in a long while, outside, the sky had cleared. The rain was gone, the air sharp and new. I walked out of the station into a sunrise that didn't feel like forgiveness yet, but it felt like the beginning of it. 2 weeks after Carly's arrest, Andy showed up at my door. No call, no warning, just a soft knock that had once meant Mom, I'm home. When I opened the door, he stood there in the rain, not the angry son who'd left, but a man who looked like he'd aged in days. Can I come in? He asked. I stepped aside. We didn't speak for a long time. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at the steam rising from his untouched coffee. Finally, he said, "Rick called me. I waited. She confessed to some of it." He whispered, "The money, the fake names, the man who disappeared." He swallowed hard. "She said she did it for survival, that she never meant to hurt anyone." His voice cracked. And for a moment I saw my boy again, the child who used to defend stray animals because he couldn't stand to see them scared. He lifted his eyes to me. "Why didn't I see it?" "Because you loved her," I said gently. "And love makes good people blind on purpose." He nodded, tears sliding down his face. "I said terrible things to you. I remember," I said softly. "But I also remember who you are." He reached across the table and took my hand, hesitant, trembling. "I thought you were trying to ruin us." "I was trying to save you," I said. He closed his eyes. "You did." The rain outside eased into a hush. Somewhere a clock ticked, steady and merciful. He finally spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's facing charges. Rick said there'll be a trial. They might tie her to that missing man." I nodded. "Justice doesn't always roar, Andy. Sometimes it just breathes." He looked around the house, the same walls that once echoed with his laughter and anger alike. "It feels different in here," he said. "It's lighter," I told him. "Truth does that." For the first time since that awful night, we smiled, small, fragile, but real. He exhaled, a long breath that sounded like forgiveness. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "You just did," I replied. When he left, I stood by the window, watching him walk down the path, the rain washing his shoulders clean. He didn't look back, not out of coldness, but out of peace. Some journeys end by facing forward. That night, as I sat alone with the quiet, I realized I no longer felt like a mother waiting for her child to come home. I felt like a woman who had finally come home to herself. The trial came and went, as trials do. There were witnesses, statements, documents, and truths that had waited years to be spoken. Carly never once looked at me during the proceedings. Not when the evidence was shown, not when the verdict was read. Maybe that was her last defense, pretending I wasn't there. And he sat in the back row. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The silence between us had changed, no longer full of accusation, but of understanding. When it was over, the judge read the sentence calmly, without drama. It wasn't vengeance. It was closure measured in law. And as the gavel fell, I realized something I'd spent my whole life teaching others but never truly practiced myself. Justice isn't about punishment. It's about release. Outside the courthouse, the wind was cold but clear. Reporters shouted questions, but I kept walking. Rick caught up to me on the steps. "You did the right thing," he said. "I didn't do it for me," I replied. He smiled. "You never do." Later that evening, I sat by the window, the same one I'd stared through the night the glass first hit my face. The sky looked different now. Still gray, still endless, but softer, like even the clouds had learned to rest. And he came by quietly. He didn't knock. He just walked in, sat beside me, and handed me a single white rose. "I know you don't like red anymore," he said. I smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach your lips but still warms your heart. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Some forgiveness isn't spoken. It's shared in silence. When he left, I placed a rose in a glass of water on the table. Its petals were wide open, unguarded. It leaned slightly toward the window, as if it knew where the light came from. For the first time, I allowed myself to exhale, not as a judge, not as a mother, but simply as a woman who had survived her own story. It's spring again. The air smells like rain and beginnings. I sit by the same window where everything started, the one that once reflected a woman afraid of what truth might cost her. Now it only reflects the light, and he visits often. Sometimes we talk, sometimes we don't. Some days he brings coffee, other days his silence. Both feel like love. He's learning to live again, not with bitterness, but with understanding. He doesn't ask about Carly anymore. He doesn't have to. Some stories close themselves. Rick stopped by last week with a file under his arm. "Case closed," he said simply. He left it on the table and walked out with a grin that didn't need words. I didn't open it. There's no peace in rereading Pain. In the evenings, I walk through my garden, The roses have started to bloom red, white, and soft yellow, all tangled together like time forgiving itself. The wind moves through them gently, and for a moment, I swear I hear a voice, not Carly's, not Andy's, mine, the one I silenced years ago to keep the peace, the one that finally speaks without needing permission. I used to believe justice was about right and wrong, but now, I think it's about remembering who you are after the storm passes and still choosing kindness. I pick one rose, the palest of them all, and set it in a small vase on my desk beside the photo of Andy as a boy. The bruise on my face is long gone. The hurt isn't, but it doesn't rule me anymore. I whisper to the quiet. I was never broken, just bent long enough to learn where I could bend no more. The clock ticks once, the world exhales, and for the first time, I feel the weight lift, not because life got easier, but because I finally stopped carrying what wasn't mine. Outside, the wind carries the scent of roses through the open window, and I smile. Justice isn't about punishment, it's about peace. And sometimes peace begins when you forgive yourself for surviving. I planted roses where they threw glass, and they bloomed louder than any apology ever could.